Hi, my name is Natalie Bump Vena, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Urban Studies at Queens College. At the end of last semester, at the end of the school year, last year, I was exhausted. I had developed symptoms of COVID-19 shortly after Queens College went online. My baby also developed those symptoms, and it was terrifying. But I worked through the illness, I worked through that terror, and I continued teaching because I wanted to serve my students, many of whom I knew were dealing with unimaginable trauma related to this pandemic. So by the time I submitted my grades at the end of May, I was ready just to spend time with my son Baldwin, who I named after the Harlem legend James Baldwin. But at the end of May, I was also extremely angry. I was furious that my Black and Latinx brothers and sisters were dying from COVID-19 at the highest rates. I was apoplectic about George Floyd's casual public murder. I was mad that so many of my colleagues across CUNY were being laid off by CUNY Central as well as Queens College. And I was enraged that our state leadership still, and is still today, but definitely was then, unwilling to raise taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers in order to preserve vital public services like CUNY, which offers an affordable, high-quality education to New Yorkers. So, as a Black woman in America, I know what James Baldwin said is true. To be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage almost all the time. So rather than tuning out the world and cuddling with my baby, I decided to channel my rage into an op-ed on something about which I am an expert, namely how CUNY advances racial justice when so few American institutions do. So, after many drafts and input from family, friends, students, and colleagues, I submitted an op-ed to the New York Daily News, and that publication ran it on June 10th. And today, I want to share that op-ed with you, and I'm going to read it to you now. Queens College, where I teach, is currently bracing for steep budget cuts, as are its sister campuses across the city university. Administrators plan to fire hundreds of adjunct professors, causing class sizes to balloon and course offerings to shrink. George Floyd's murder has inspired Americans to protest racism on a scale unseen in 50 years. In addition to reforming law enforcement, New York must find the political will to preserve public institutions like CUNY that lift people of color out of poverty. Our state representatives are currently in the throes of the legislative session, and New York's budget will reveal the true extent of their commitment to racial justice. Nearly 80% of CUNY undergraduates are people of color. They face daily discrimination and inherit the intergenerational consequences of racism. Most have found their only opportunity for higher education at CUNY. I know what we will lose if our political leaders continue whittling away the university, not only because I work here, but because Bronx Community College changed my mother's life. Deborah Richmond Bump was born in 1953 at Harlem Hospital. A Black woman, she descends from slaves and sharecroppers in Georgia and North Carolina. When my mother was 10 years old, my grandfather grew ill from kidney disease and had to stop working construction. My mother's responsibilities at home grew, including babysitting her younger brother and sister when my grandmother began working evening shifts. My grandfather died when my mother was a sophomore at Lewis Brandeis High School. Grieving her father and caring for her siblings, my mother was a self-described marginal student and had no solid plans to enter college. However, she was a high school senior during an era when CUNY offered free tuition and guaranteed every graduate of New York City public schools admission to a community college. Motivated to help patients like her father, she decided to attend Bronx Community College to study nursing. She enrolled in the fall of 1971 and with faculty support graduated in 1976. One professor devoted 4 full days to tutoring her so that she could pass a pharmacology exam necessary to obtain her nursing degree. It is this kind of personal attention that students will miss if the university fires instructors and increases class sizes. After graduating, my mother passed the New York State LPN and RN exams. She eventually got a BA in psychology and an MS in nursing. She has spent 40 years working with low-income communities of color. When I ask what BCC means to her, my mother says, "It changed my life. I could have been out there, hanging out. I could have gone either way." My mother's CUNY education directly benefited me through what my student Tiara Miller aptly calls the university's domino effect. I earned a JD and a PhD, and I'm a professor now. Tiara Miller took my course, Urban Poverty and Affluence, this past spring. A Black woman, she will be the first person in her family to graduate from college, even though she initially lacked any plans for higher education. Tiara worked for several years after high school and eventually enrolled in the dental hygiene program in Hostos Community College. While meeting with her Hostos advisor, he asked, "Why do you want to be a dental hygienist? Why don't you be a dentist?" As a result of that conversation, she decided to attain a doctorate in dentistry. Tiara transferred to Queens College, where she is continuing her pre-dental coursework. Rather than compromise the futures of students like my mother and Tiara, including the 190,000 plus undergraduates of color who are currently enrolled at CUNY, New York should adopt the SHARE Act. Under the legislation, the state would temporarily increase taxes on New Yorkers who earn more than $5 million annually in order to protect CUNY, SUNY, and K-12 public schools from catastrophic budget cuts. This is a modest price to pay for racial justice. So thank you for listening to my op-ed. These days, I am still very angry. I'm angry that so many of my colleagues have been laid off and as a result have lost not only their livelihoods, but in many cases their health care as well. And because I have lost so many of my talented colleagues, our class sizes have indeed ballooned. So my class sizes right now are larger than ever, and quite frankly, I am scared. I'm scared that I won't be able to provide the support to my students that my mom received at Bronx Community College, and that support is really what changed her life. So as we begin the school year, I'm angry, I'm scared, and I'm enraged that our state still doesn't have a budget. I'm enraged that our state leadership still is not committing to taxing the wealthiest among us in order to preserve institutions like CUNY that, again, actually advance racial justice in America. But I am trying to channel my rage into action. And this year, this fall, and for many falls to come, I am looking forward to taking action with all of you in our 5-borough community. And I am thinking of all of you as we begin this school year, and I'm wishing you the best of luck, and I am sending you strength and solidarity.